Steve? Louder!
Well, I want to make sure that everyone knows just how considerate we are of this wonderful public space, and that's what we're talking about today. Welcome to Portland's Living Room.
Yes.
We've been coming by Portland's Living Room on a regular basis every week, every Friday at 5 p.m. And this week we have a very special guest. We have a gentleman who has really made it his life to create public spaces like this. Mark Lakeman, who also goes by the name Motion, right? And that's spelled M-O-C-E-A-N. Wonderful nickname, I think. Is the director of the City Repair Project. And this is all about creating community vision, creating gathering spaces, transforming, as he says, transforming space into place. Now this is, of course, what we are currently arguing with the city and with Pioneer Courthouse Square Incorporated about. We believe that Pioneer Courthouse Square is not just a space, and certainly not just a commercial space. It's a place. It's a living room. It's a place for gathering. It's a place for becoming engaged with civic life, with the life of the community. We think what we're doing here is injecting life into what would otherwise be a lifeless space. We're making it a place, making it a living room. And so it is with great pleasure that I introduce someone who's going to talk more about this very fundamental, this very valuable concept of community, Mr. Mark Lakeman.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
No.
A little louder.
Well, it's always an incredible, not only a pleasure, but a trip through time to come to this place, because there are layers and layers of stories here, some of which Portlanders know, and some of which, many of which they don't. But I want to first of all thank Portland Peaceful Response for being so resilient and tenacious and loving, for doing this kind of work here on behalf of all of us in Portland, really standing up for us all. And that's really the story of Pioneer Courthouse Square as well. People standing up for a principle, for literally a place, for the notion of freedom of assembly. At the beginning of the process, people were saying, well, what good is freedom of assembly without a place to assemble, for God's sake? Looking around the city at the beginning of the process, they said to themselves, what in the world is happening here? A city 150 years old and not one single public square? When all of us came from places like place fabric, village fabric, every single race, all across the geography of the planet. A sense of place that was replete in the villages where we grew and where we built culture, where we learned how to speak and sing and count and share stories. And it was in these intersections where we built culture and we developed a sense of self. So, really, assembly, place, intersections, culture, they come together, they're mutually interdependent. And at the beginning of Pioneer Square, of course, it really wasn't so much a beginning because there were stories and stories going on here. Indigenous people subsumed by violent processes that were so corrupt and unjust, unfair and violent. You know, after a while things rose here and things were torn down in a process that really is what paved the way for capitalism, in which time and space and life was viewed as a commodity. Perhaps there was a school here and then it was torn down, another thing was built and then it was torn down, and then the Portland Hotel was built. And it was torn down to make a 2-story parking garage here. Myron Frank tore down an enormous, wonderful, lavish and beautiful thing that could have been a legacy for our whole city. And it was a gathering place, but it was reduced to rubble. And then this parking garage was built. And around the beginning of the 70s, there was a plan advanced to build an 11-story parking garage. And they knew at the same time that there was a movement to create a public square here. There was talk all across the city about taking some block and turning it into a public living room at last, after 150 years. One place where time and space and life would not be for sale. Myron Frank had different ideas. Frank Ivensey had different ideas. A couple of other members of the city council had different ideas. And Ivensey is actually on record as having said, we can't build that. That would facilitate a revolution. Well, that was an invitation. In fact, people within the city government itself and within the neighborhoods and also in businesses all across the city joined their forces to take this vision forward and stop that 11-story parking garage and create this place of assembly. Supposedly, it's one of the 5 most successful and most beautiful public places in all the world. I don't need to think of it that way. I just think of it as our place at the heart of our city. It's a very successful place that works to bring us together in formal and informal ways for celebrations and incidental gatherings. You know, the notion of democracy, it's not really so much about voting. It's about making decisions. It's about saying hello. It's about falling in love. Yeah, we make decisions, but then after that, do we get to inhabit the fruit of our labor? After making those choices together, do we become improved people where we actually know how to speak and we know how to listen to each other? Well, supposedly out of true democracy, families flourish and people become richer in a cultural sense. That's why this place was created. But there was something of a war that had to happen in order for it to be created, and how unfortunate. You know, why would we ever have to fight against any interest, any of the large businesses downtown? Why did we have to fight them? Why did we have to fight our supposed leader, Frank Ivensey, our mayor, in order to create at last a place for children and families to come together and see each other, a place where time and space and life would not be for sale, one place where we would not have to experience this sort of barrage of commodification upon our senses. So that's what this place is about, and that's why people fought so hard to create it. And as it becomes further and further controlled and restricted, we have to stand up against that and retain it for the future, because even this can become defunct if it becomes too dysfunctional and too authoritarian in the way that it's administrated, in the way that it's run. I just want to think for a second about war. I mean, we're talking about the Iraq War lately, but that's only the latest chapter in an ongoing kind of war. I mean, as we're enacting this war across the ocean and draining our communities of resources that go to kill and destroy other communities, you know, at the same time we're noticing that there's strife in the streets and our children are troubled and they're seeking to escape from their communities and families are being fragmented. And as we redirect our resources to other places, we know that we are bearing the cost. We are bearing it right at home. We can see it in our children's eyes. We can see it in the way that the planet's climate is changing. Our attentions are redirected elsewhere while our national coffers are pilfered. And also, while we perpetually don't seem to be in control of our own destinies at a local level. Well, I'm very proud to live in Portland, Oregon, and I don't pretend that it's a perfect place. But it certainly is developing a stronger sense of place. I'm proud of the fact that we stand up and we say we want more bike lanes. We want more bike lane miles per capita. Now we have more commuters per capita, more bike commuters per capita, and more bike lane miles per capita than any other city in the nation, and we have nowhere near enough, just like those other cities do. We have the strongest citizen involvement infrastructure in the city, and yet it's comparatively weak compared to what it needs to become. There are so many different ways in which this city is the leading city in the nation, and yet it is so insignificant still compared to what it needs to be in terms of what it needs to become in order for us to really direct our own destiny. But I'm so proud of us all for fighting the good fight, or rather dancing the good dance, or however you want to creatively think of it. We should be enjoying ourselves along the way as we're struggling at the same time and engaging, you know, really every point of conflict that is necessary in order to win the day. I'm so happy to be able to be here and to talk about this War isn't something that I normally talk about. Normally I'm getting to be creative with other Portlanders. But I do care. Everybody in the city does care, even if we're in denial and even if we're trying to hide. We feel strongly about it. So I'm really proud of us all for being here today, and proud of you all in particular who come here every week to stand up on our behalf. And I think it makes an enormous difference. If people weren't standing up across the nation on street corners like this, how much worse would it possibly be if there wasn't any sense of resistance, as if we were all complicit in the situation and the politicians were entirely unfettered? What would be happening on this planet? So even if it seems as if we haven't quite changed the world yet and war has not been extinguished, it has made an enormous difference. And as we continue to apply more and more pressure and create alternative infrastructures that demonstrate a better way of living, eventually it will happen that war will be extinguished. But if that's going to happen, at the same time, we have to see not war merely in conventional terms, because there's a perpetual war. There's a perpetual war against families, against children, against the lower class, so-called lower classes by the upper classes. An erosion of our quality of life, a betrayal of inherent social contracts of what it means to be human. And so we need to not give up. In fact, we won't give up, and we can't give up because we're hardwired to love each other and to connect. So anyway, that's all I have to say today. I'm really glad to be here, and I really appreciate you all. Thank you.
Really, thanks so much for invigorating. Sign, we got a spare sign here.
Here I am again. I guess I have
Who are you guys with?
Top watch.
All right. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
NOWAR Drum Corps. And we are the Portland Peaceful Response Coalition. We're out here every Friday evening at 5 p.m., starting out at Pioneer Courthouse Square, to talk about peace and social justice issues. I don't know how many of you out there are aware of this, but last Friday, it was International Close Down Guantanamo Bay Day, and it deserves, I think, more than just a day, because that hellhole exists, and the things that are going on there in our days. We must close down Guantanamo Bay. It is unconstitutional, and it is against international law. People are being tortured to death there. Abuse and torture, we say no. Close down Guantanamo. Abuse and torture, we say no. Close down Guantanamo. Abuse and torture, we say no. Abuse and torture, we say no.
Right on. Well, this week we saw George Bush go to the Middle East on a little tour.
Maybe it's a farewell tour. He hasn't been to Israel yet. I guess he thought he'd stop by for a photo op. And, try to tell everybody that would listen that Iran is a dangerous country. That we must contain them, that we must be ever vigilant because they're such a dangerous country, and yet we're the ones with several battleships cruising along the Iranian coast. They sent out 5 little fiberglass speedboats, and George Bush tries to make it sound like they're provoking World War III. Bullshit! It's Bush that's provoking World War III.
Oh, bullshit!
But nobody is buying it. He keeps trying to sell the Iran war. While Bush was landing in Kuwait, El Baradei, the guy from the International Atomic Energy Agency, was landing in Tehran for more inspections. Iran was all too glad to have him come there to show them that they had nothing to fear. But Bush was out every day of the week.
Chapter 72. Chapter 72.
Veterans for Peace, Chapter 72.
George Bush does not represent me, and he does not represent the people of this country. He is increasingly irrelevant, yet still dangerous.
Not my president.
Not my president! Not my war!
Not my president! Not my war! Not my president!
Not my war.
Not my president!
Everybody's best interest. People got to wake up.
Not my war.
Not my president! Not my war! 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 Not my
Hey, they're going to privatize the police force too, man. You'll be out of a job. There won't be any more civilian police. They'll all be Blackwater or privatized. Probably make more money, but... You don't believe me, huh? You don't believe me.
We've been doing this for over 6 years. Still the war goes on. Someone refresh my memory. Why exactly did we invade Iraq? Well, one of the reasons I heard for us invading Iraq was that Saddam Hussein was a terrible he was responsible for the death of over 300,000 of his fellow Iraqis over a period of over 30 years. George Bush, in his policy, in his war, has been responsible for over 1 million Iraqi deaths in just 5 years. How does that add up? Is this worth it?
No!
How does it last? Bring them back! Troops, hold still!
Wait up.
The number of American troops who commit suicide every year, in fact every day, is at about a 30-year high. It's very alarming. I forget what the actual figure is, but
Thousands.
American troops are killing themselves, taking their own lives because well, I don't know why. I think you can figure that out. Support our troops. Bring them home. 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 Support our troops. Support our troops. Support our troops.
gonna be.
Again. I need the dance. I need the dance again. What a dance.
Tropical people.
What's that?
I come from a tropical.
Well, thank you all for coming down again tonight. I just appreciate seeing all these faces. I'm so glad to see everybody here standing up for freedom of speech. I do have one announcement to make, and that is tomorrow at the Peace House at 7 p.m. there's going to be a party fundraiser. Seriously pissed off grannies are trying to raise funds for their legal issues and fines and so forth, but it's also a party. I think there's going to be some kind of entertainment there. Even if there's not, I know these ladies are very entertaining as it is. So please show up for that tomorrow, 7 p.m. at the Peace House. That's 2116 Northeast 18th. That's the corner of 18th and Tillamook. Hope to see you there.
That's it. That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Great. Oh yeah, and think positive about it.
Yes, we have a request here to think positive about impeachment.
It's going to...
And if you don't get arrested or you get out of here,
Does anybody else have any announcements? Anything you want to tell before we go?
I'd like to say something. Approaching the National Sanitization of Martin Luther King Day, I just wanted to quote from his wonderful speech Beyond Vietnam that he gave a year before he was killed. You could exchange the word Vietnam for the word Iraq, and the speech is for today. So I just want to quote one sentence from the speech, which goes like this: "A nation that year after year spends more on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death." Thank you.
See you, Richard.
That's why we're out here to talk about impeachment. We don't want to talk about noise ordinances. We want to talk about impeachment.
That's right.
Thanks everybody for coming out.
Anything else is just, forget about it.
I really didn't tell him.
Why hand the unitary presidency over to anybody?
We should bring church
Why?
together.
We don't hold this guy
Is that
down.
my sign?